Check it out, today I'll be reviewing the block by block correction pen from Bombing Science. I got two of these and they're a pretty typical correction pen with the ball tip on top and a reverse screw to open it up yourself. They each have a mixing ball inside and I'll be testing them out on a variety of surfaces. So let's get into it. Our first test here is going to be on some black plastic vinyl. The correction pen has a ball tip on it, so you're not going to get perfect lines on a smooth surface. There's going to be some streaking involved as the ball rolls. But moving slower and with more pressure, you'll be able to mitigate these just a little bit. The tags are still legible and writing is very smooth. The stock ink that comes with these markers, however, does scratch off pretty easily on the vinyl. It doesn't allow for it to set into the surface much at all. Being able to scratch off the paint on vinyl is not abnormal for most paint markers. Unless you're using a solvent ink, there's no way that you're going to actually etch into the vinyl, and that most paint just sits on the surface. After leaving the paint on the vinyl for a few hours to dry, it became significantly harder to scratch it off even with the keys. So next up we have cardboard. This is a little bit rougher of a surface, but by no means is as rough as brick or concrete. The paint sets into the cardboard just a little bit, but you can still read the tag pretty well. We have a pretty smooth line, but you can definitely see the ridges of the cardboard coming through on each tag. You can get an idea of how much it actually sets in over the darker letters in the background. Now moving on to a slightly rougher surface, we have wood. Wood was a bit harder to tag on because you had to put a lot of pressure on the marker body to make sure the paint was coming out, as well as down on the wood to make sure that you were having a smooth line over the bumpy surface. Even though the wood's a light shade of brown, you can still see the white pretty heavily off of it. This is a good testament to the opacity of the marker. I wouldn't recommend this marker for clean tags on wood, but you can definitely muster something up if you press down hard enough and take your time. Next up we've got some plain steel. The smooth surface allows for the lines to flow a little better, and even though it's dark in the background, you can still see the opacity holding through. Much like the vinyl, I left the steel to dry for a few hours before I tried scraping it off, and unfortunately it was a lot easier than the vinyl. I was able to even scrape it off with my fingernail. You can basically see the same results as the regular steel here on the blue painted steel. Many artists, and myself included, find metal to be the best surface for these correction pens. I wanted to do a swipe dry test to see how long the paint takes to set, so with each letter I added basically a second of time to let it dry. It turned out that this paint dries pretty fast. The S I took about a second to wait, the I about 2, and by 3 seconds the V you don't really see much, and then next to 5 seconds on the E there's really no streaking involved. So under 5 or 6 seconds you're going to be pretty much having a solid dried tag on even a surface that's not porous. After some preliminary tests on the brick, I decided to water down the paint to get a little bit better flow. This first one is done in real time, so I took a lot of care to make sure I was getting enough paint out on the brick. And then I speeded up to what I would actually expect to be doing a tag in. You can see that it writes pretty well, but the ink deposit's definitely less. The ball tip did show some wear after writing on the brick surface, but it was nothing that would really compromise the entire marker. So you may have noticed me switching my grip up a few times in this video. I found that holding the pen traditionally didn't always give enough pressure to get a nice smooth line. Switching the grip to have the pen more in the palm of my hand and pressing down with my 4 fingers, I was actually able to get a lot smoother lines and a lot more consistent flow out of the marker. This was a little hard to get used to as it compromised some of the movement in my wrist, but I was still able to get some pretty smooth tags. And a second note about the physical marker performance is that the ball tip can tend to get dried up. This issue is not totally specific to just block by block. I've found that this is pretty much unanimous with all ball tip pens. And simply just working the ball tip on a rougher surface to get it rolling again really helps to clear it out. Overall, the performance of the block by block correction pen was exactly what I expected. It's a pretty standard correction pen, and the flow using the stock ink could use a little work, but refilling it with your own thinner ink after you do use the initial ink, it seemed to work a ton better, and I was really happy with the use. If you like what you saw and you want to pick one of the block by block markers up for yourself, I got mine over at bombingscience.com. You can save $5 off orders over $69 using the code SCIVE5 and save $10 on orders over $149 using the coupon code SCIVE10. I hope you enjoyed the review and be on the lookout for some others popping up on the channel. That's going to do it for me, guys. Peace.